So the topic for the week, at least for Linda and I, is this uh, common quote, "This is just who I am." And I'm subtitling painful qualities as the subtitle for today. So from a Buddhist perspective, we don't see it that way, that there's could be such a thing as this is just who I am. Um, so rather than that kind of sense of a fixed self, Buddhism does point to this shifting constellation of conditions, and our sense of self, our sense of who we are changes as different mental qualities, wholesome and unwholesome, arise, go away. So, and as our awareness and really our wisdom deepen, we really get that we're a mixed bag. No one, at least no one that I know, has it all together. But nonetheless, we can often project that fantasy really upon ourselves and upon others, the belief or even the perception that we should or do have it all together. Though this will inevitably, I believe, lead to disappointment and dukkha, because when someone falls from the pedestal, which it seems like they inevitably do, it can be a rude awakening. Though I'm going to suggest that it's awakening nonetheless. Um, and I like that term, a rude awakening. Awakening, that's a very Buddhist word, but it may be less rude if we remember the teaching that that everything is nothing, rather, I should say, is purely all good or all bad, and that we are, like all things, dependently arisen. Though, at the same time, there are some underlying deep patterns that can seem like this is who I am. The term that we use in the Pali language is saṅkhāras, which are conditioned formations. Um, and so we're not suggesting that you reject these patterns. Again, we're suggesting probably you can't really even reject them, but meet them with awareness and curiosity. Though I would say that the habitual response to them is to just have aversion, look the other way, deny, dissociate. In Yogacara Buddhism, Linda and I took a training on that last week. These latent tendencies are described as residing in the alaya vijnana, which is the storehouse consciousness. In Western psychology, we say they reside in the unconscious, whatever language they use, and I'm not sure they reside anywhere, but regardless of whether that's true or not, these patterns are potent and I think may never fully disappear. But we can choose whether we want to proliferate them or feed them. And we also can often make the choice to sort of lean into something that's more wholesome, towards less harming, towards more kindness, towards more friendliness. When we look at the political sphere, we can see unwholesome states being enacted with sometimes it feels like startling clarity. Now, we know these tendencies were always present, excuse me, but they are now being openly displayed, normalizing greed, hatred, and delusion, and giving really permission for people to act them out. Or, I don't know, maybe the causality runs the other way, or likely both ways for um, but what I mean by the other way is people may have supported leaders who reflect and legitimize their own unexamined or harmful impulses. It's been a difficult week in national politics, and I am feeling national and international, excuse me, politics, and I feel the weight of it. As most of you know, ethics is foundational in Buddhism. Early Buddhism, as I understand it, is not about escaping this life, but living it with greater integrity, with greater care and responsibility. This is not a small undertaking and rarely straightforward. which is why we sometimes speak about situational ethics or situational discernment. Now, apart from the clearest violation of ethics or sila in the Pali language, such as killing, which tragically continues on an ever greater scale. Well, maybe it is an ever greater, historically speaking. It seems very great to me. But anyway, despite that, most ethical dilemmas live in gray areas. These gray areas require ongoing, or maybe ongoing, I don't like that word, but as much as possible, awareness, reflection, and humility. So the big question is, how do we live more ethically with our conditioned patterns, with feeling critical, with our irritation, maybe even feeling the mean-spirited or even cruel? So what's helped me is recognizing dukkha in them as a reliable teacher. When I feel critical or unkind, I am beginning to more clearly recognize not that there's not only harm to others, but I feel it. I feel the pain of it. And for those of us with a functioning moral conscience, it can also, I think it feels like an inner ache or dissonance. And meditation and reflection can really help us to feel this directly without so much defensiveness and let it inform our choices. So lately, I have returned back to the practice of restraint around criticalness. And I'm talking about like when I'm thinking critical thoughts, but and also when I have the impulse to say them aloud. Um, Now this restraint, I don't think eliminates the underlying tendency, but it does reduce harm, I think, and it certainly feels better. I used to believe and also teach that turning about away from these patterns would eventually wear them out. And that may be true for some habits, but I don't know about those that are really closely bound up with deep senses of our identity and our views. Perhaps a different approach may be needed. Rather than holding a perfectionist expectation of erasure, and I do think that is a perfectionist expectation, I'm learning to see these patterns more clearly, understand their conditions, and take more responsibility for their impact. I believe this to be part of our path of awakening. So that is where I'm going to end the talk for today. And we've all been